Our story opens with a man called Dwight, living without a roof over his head, drifting from one empty property to another. On this particular day, he slipped into someone's home and decided to clean himself up in their bathroom. The sound of the front door swinging open sent him into immediate panic. Without thinking twice, he launched himself through the window and disappeared into the streets. This was his reality, moving from place to place with no real direction, just surviving one day at a time. Eventually, he stumbled upon what looked like a worthless piece of junk, an old vehicle that had been abandoned and left to rot. But to Dwight, this wreck was everything. It became his shelter, his only belonging in the world. Every evening followed the same routine. He'd search through garbage bins for whatever scraps of food people had thrown away, then retreat to his makeshift home, lose himself in books he found, and eventually drift off to sleep. To anyone watching, this man appeared to have given up on life entirely. But beneath that broken exterior, Dwight was burning with a purpose that had kept him going for 2 full decades. He was waiting for one specific person to walk out of prison, someone he intended to destroy with his bare hands. The following morning brought a familiar face. Eddie, a police officer who had crossed paths with Dwight before, yanked him out of the vehicle and made her position clear. She didn't want him causing problems, especially now. The reason? Wade Cleland was about to taste freedom again. This was the same Wade who had taken everything from Dwight 20 years earlier by murdering his mother and father. The moment those words reached Dwight's ears, something ignited deep within him. His entire existence had been reduced to one single objective: ending Wade's life, knowing that his target would soon be walking the streets again. Dwight immediately began his preparations. He managed to get his broken-down vehicle operational by installing a fresh battery. Virginia was where they were releasing Wade, which meant that's exactly where Dwight needed to be. He walked into a store that sold firearms, but the prices were completely beyond his reach. He wrote a message to his sister and then began breaking into parked vehicles, desperately hoping to find a weapon someone had left behind. After checking several cars, luck seemed to be on his side when he discovered a firearm. The problem was the safety mechanism was locked tight. He struggled with it, trying everything he could think of to break it open, but in his frustration, he ended up destroying the entire weapon. Standing there with the broken pieces, he made a decision. He would take Wade's life without any weapon at all, using nothing but his own hands. So Dwight set off toward Virginia completely unarmed. When he arrived, he positioned himself outside the prison facility, watching and waiting to see exactly when Wade would emerge and where he would head afterward. Time passed slowly until finally, an expensive limousine pulled up to the prison entrance. Wade stepped out into the daylight, and his family rushed toward him, their faces filled with pure happiness as they embraced him tightly. Dwight stood there watching this reunion, tears running down his face. The person responsible for destroying his family was now surrounded by love and celebration, laughing freely as if he hadn't ruined countless lives. The moment they drove away, Dwight began tailing them at a distance. Not long after, Wade's family decided to stop at a local bar to continue their celebration. Dwight's anger propelled him forward as he found a back entrance and slipped inside unnoticed, concealing himself in the restroom and waiting for the right moment when Wade would be alone. The second Wade walked through that bathroom door, Dwight exploded from his hiding spot and drove a blade deep into Wade's throat. But Wade didn't go down immediately. He fought back with surprising strength despite the injury. Dwight refused to stop. He attacked again, this time plunging the knife directly into Wade's skull. Wade collapsed onto the floor, barely clinging to life, taking his final breaths, realizing Wade was finished. Dwight tried to make his escape as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Wade's family members started getting concerned. Why was he taking so long in there? They began moving toward the bathroom to check on him. Dwight rushed outside, slashed one of the tires on Wade's vehicle, and sprinted toward his own car, looking down at his hand. He noticed a serious gash that was bleeding profusely. His mind raced as he realized his car keys must have fallen during the struggle inside. Making a split-second decision, he ran back to Wade's vehicle instead. Climbing into the driver's seat, he was relieved to find the keys still sitting there. He fired up the engine and accelerated away from the scene. After driving for several minutes, something in the rearview mirror caught his attention. He slammed on the brakes and discovered a young boy named William hiding in the back seat. William's voice trembled as he asked why Dwight had killed Wade. Dwight's response was direct and cold. Wade had murdered his parents and left him alone in this world. The boy's reaction was unexpected. He seemed terrified and bolted from the vehicle, running as fast as he could. This strange response planted seeds of doubt in Dwight's mind. Had he just killed the wrong person? Could Wade have been covering for someone else's crimes all these years before long? Dwight spotted an isolated house that appeared completely vacant. He went inside with the intention of changing everything about his appearance. First came the hair and beard, cutting them off so drastically that his own reflection looked like a stranger. He scrubbed himself clean in the shower, wrapped his bleeding hand in bandages, and changed into fresh clothing. Switching on the television, he cycled through every news station available, searching for any coverage of Wade's death. There was nothing, not a single mention anywhere. Stepping back outside, he noticed a large truck sitting nearby. He approached the driver and asked if he could catch a ride. His destination was his sister Sam's place. Sam had lost her husband some time ago, and was now raising her two kids completely on her own. When Dwight finally arrived at her doorstep, Sam couldn't contain her emotions. Seeing her brother after all these years overwhelmed her with joy. They decided to grab a meal together at a nearby restaurant. During their conversation, Dwight dropped the news that he had killed Wade, the man responsible for destroying their parents. Sam's immediate reaction was anger. But somewhere beneath that anger was a tiny sense of relief. The person who had shattered their lives was finally gone forever. Sam explained to Dwight that the Cleland family actually lived in the same area, and they weren't just nearby. They were extremely wealthy and powerful. They had made a habit of humiliating her whenever they got the chance, constantly showing off their expensive limousine and their status. As their conversation continued, Dwight began to understand just how dangerous this family really was. Now that he had taken Wade's life, they wouldn't simply accept it and move on. They would be coming for blood, and they would be coming soon. Suddenly, a thought struck Dwight. They were both sitting here in this restaurant. But who was watching Sam's children? They both panicked simultaneously and rushed back to the house as fast as they could. Sam burst through the door and found both kids completely safe and unharmed. But her relief quickly transformed into rage and terror. She came back outside and slapped Dwight hard across the face, her voice shaking with anger. Everything in their lives had been stable and peaceful until he showed up. Now, he had put the entire family in terrible danger, and she had no idea how to protect her children. Dwight tried to calm her down, promising he would handle everything. But she and the kids needed to leave immediately. He told her to pack their belongings and take the children to Pittsburgh without delay. She couldn't come back until he had resolved this situation completely. Sam understood that her children's safety was the only thing that mattered now. She gathered their things quickly and left, leaving Dwight behind to face whatever was coming. Now Dwight had to ensure that nobody would go after his sister and her kids. He inspected every corner of the house carefully. Then began thinking about how he would defend himself when Wade's family inevitably showed up. Looking for revenge. The problem was there were no weapons anywhere in the house. Not even a simple kitchen knife. He gathered whatever random objects he could find that might be useful and prepared himself to wait. As darkness fell over the neighborhood, he heard the sound of a vehicle approaching. Running to the window, he spotted two of Wade's brothers, Teddy and Carl. Getting out of their car, Dwight knew instantly that they had come heavily armed with the intention of killing him. He raced upstairs, switched on the bathroom light, and turned the faucet on full blast, hoping they would assume someone was up there and head straight upstairs without thoroughly searching the ground floor. Glancing outside again, he watched as the two brothers split up, one approaching from the front entrance while the other circled round to the back. Dwight hurried back downstairs and squeezed himself underneath the living room sofa, making himself as invisible as possible. Both brothers entered the house and began climbing the stairs slowly and cautiously. This gave Dwight the perfect opportunity to escape, but as he emerged from his hiding spot, he realized Carl had spotted him. Carl was carrying a bow with arrows and immediately began firing them at Dwight. Dwight ran toward his car and jumped in, hitting the accelerator hard, but in his panic, he struck Teddy with the vehicle, sending him crashing to the ground. Dwight immediately stopped, got out, and grabbed Teddy, shouting at him to answer quickly. Were they after him or were they planning to hurt his sister? But Teddy was unconscious and couldn't respond to anything. Dwight snatched Teddy's firearm and saw Carl charging toward him. He grabbed Teddy's body and started dragging him toward the car. As Dwight tried to get into the front seat, Carl released an arrow that went straight through Dwight's leg. The pain was excruciating and blood poured from the wound. Despite his injury, Dwight managed to start the vehicle and drive away with Teddy still in the car. Carl screamed and ran after them, but Dwight kept going, refusing to stop for anything. Once he was far enough away, Dwight pulled over, dragged the unconscious Teddy from the back seat, and stuffed him into the trunk. The arrow embedded in his leg was causing unbearable pain. He tried pulling it out himself, but it wouldn't budge. He drove to a store, trying to hide his injury as best as he could, and grabbed medical supplies and tools that might help him remove the arrow. Even with the supplies, he couldn't get it out. The blood loss was so severe that he began to feel like he might not survive. Finally, he had no choice but to go to the hospital the moment he arrived. Before he could even speak to a doctor, everything went black and he collapsed on the floor. When consciousness returned, he found himself lying in a hospital bed. The medical staff had treated him and his leg was now secured in a splint. His leg hadn't fully healed. But staying in the hospital wasn't an option. He forced himself up and left, making his way back to where he had parked his car. He knocked on the trunk and heard Teddy screaming loudly from inside, which confirmed he was still alive. Dwight quickly changed out of the hospital gown and into regular clothes. Everything was unfolding exactly as he had planned. He drove straight to Sam's house and immediately locked every door and window, making sure nobody could see inside from the street. He turned off all the lights and cleaned up the house before returning to the car, sitting behind the wheel. He pulled out one of Sam's old photo albums and began flipping through pictures from their childhood. Meanwhile, Teddy kept yelling from the trunk, complaining that his leg was broken and he was desperately thirsty. Dwight ignored his screams completely, lost in memories as he looked through the photographs. One picture caught his attention. It was his old friend Ben from when they were kids. Seeing Ben's face made Dwight decide to track him down. He drove to the address he remembered as Ben's family home. But when he arrived, only Ben's mother was there. She explained that Ben had been gone for nearly a year, but she recognized Dwight immediately as Ben's closest childhood friend. She handed Dwight a card with Ben's information, mentioning that he now lived in the city, and gave him the address. Dwight drove for several hours until he reached the location. A woman there informed him that Ben was still at work and wouldn't be available until his shift ended late that night. Dwight decided to wait by Ben's vehicle. Round midnight, Ben finally emerged from work, and they began catching up on old times. Dwight got straight to the point. He explained that time was running out and he needed help. Specifically, he needed a firearm. Ben could tell something serious was happening and suggested they go back to his place once they arrived at Ben's home. Ben provided Dwight with the weapon he requested and asked if he even knew how to use it properly. Dwight admitted he had no experience but figured he would learn as he went. Ben mentioned that the area behind his house was isolated, with a sheep shed where he could teach Dwight how to shoot without anyone noticing. Dwight declined, saying Ben had already done more than enough and he didn't want to involve him any further. He took the weapon and left immediately, on his way back. He also grabbed a bottle of water for Teddy, the moment Dwight opened the trunk. Teddy crawled out desperately, seeing Dwight standing there holding a gun. He immediately grabbed the water bottle and started drinking frantically. Dwight demanded to know why they had come to his house. Were they there to kill him or his sister? Teddy's reply was laced with rage as he hurled profanities at Dwight and revealed they had come with murder on their minds. Then Teddy revealed something that completely shattered Dwight's understanding of everything. He asked Dwight if he really thought his father was some kind of saint. The truth was that Dwight's father had been having an affair with Teddy's mother. When Teddy's father discovered the betrayal, he went to Dwight's house in a blind rage and killed Dwight's father. But he never intended to kill Dwight's mother. She wasn't supposed to die, but she was killed while trying to intervene and stop the violence. Teddy continued explaining that afterward, his father sent Wade to prison in his place because Wade was still a minor at the time and would receive a much lighter sentence. Hearing this truth crushed Dwight completely. He told Teddy that he wanted to end this cycle of violence forever. He didn't want his family dragged into this nightmare ever again. He even offered to admit to killing Wade and turn himself over to the police. Teddy laughed at this suggestion, explaining that their family didn't operate according to normal laws or rules. They had their own code, their own justice system. Now Dwight's entire family would pay the price, including his sister and both of her children. Upon hearing this threat, Dwight fired a warning shot that terrified Teddy. Dwight handed him a phone and ordered him to call his family and tell them that Dwight was coming to finish this once and for all. Nobody else needed to do anything. Teddy made the call and delivered the message to his family. A few moments later, Dwight reached forward to take the phone back from Teddy's hand. That split second of distraction was all Teddy needed. He launched himself at Dwight, wrestled the gun away from him, and pointed it directly at Dwight's head. Teddy began talking about how their family operated outside the law. His father had committed 2 murders and never served a single day in prison. He died of cancer, and now Dwight was about to die too. He raised the weapon to execute Dwight, but in that instant, a bullet exploded through the air from nearby and hit Teddy square in the skull. The shot had come from Ben, who had been worried about his friend and decided to follow him. Ben helped Dwight to his feet and admitted he knew Dwight would end up in trouble, which is why he had been tailing him this whole time. He handed Dwight a proper weapon and gave him some crucial advice. Having a gun meant nothing if you couldn't hit your target. Ben then spent time teaching Dwight how to shoot accurately, and gradually Dwight's aim began to improve. After the training session, Ben gave him the gun along with some money and food supplies. He told Dwight that his problems were Ben's problems too. The two friends walked together for a while, but Dwight refused any further assistance. He told Ben that he had already saved his life, and that was more than enough help. Their paths needed to separate here. With that, Dwight walked away. Ben tried to follow in his vehicle, but after a short distance, his car suddenly stopped working. Opening the hood, he discovered that Dwight had intentionally sabotaged the battery. Dwight knew Ben wouldn't stop following him otherwise, and he didn't want to put his friend in any more danger. Dwight continued on alone and stopped to eat the food Ben had given him. Then, gathering all his courage, he entered the Cleland family's home. He searched through the house for any weapons they might have stored, and when he found them, he threw every single one into the nearby lake so they would have nothing to use against him. After that, he made his way to the cemetery where Wade's father was buried. The same man who had actually killed his parents. Dwight knew he couldn't harm a dead person, but he still felt the need to disrespect the grave as a form of revenge, so he urinated on it. He then dragged Terrier's body to a hole he had dug behind the house earlier and buried him there. Going back inside, he sat down quietly and waited for the rest of the family to return home. He had set up traps throughout the house, but as time passed, nobody came. When the lights suddenly switched on that evening, it startled him. He grabbed his weapon and moved cautiously to see who had arrived, only to realize the lights were on a timer and came on automatically every evening at 7. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. He called the Cleland family's home number and left a message stating that he wanted to end this conflict permanently. He had no issue with their entire family, only with the person who had murdered his parents. But if they went after his sister, he would make sure not a single one of them survived. Several hours passed before the Clelands finally returned to their house. 3 people entered together, Carl and his 2 sisters. From their conversation, Dwight learned something that filled him with rage. They knew exactly where Sam was. She was still in Pittsburgh with her children, and they were planning to kill all 3 of them, unable to control his fury. Dwight shot Carl. Now only the 2 sisters remained alive. Dwight told them clearly that he had no desire to destroy their whole family. His only grudge had been against their father, but they had made a fatal mistake by targeting his sister. Suddenly, William appeared out of nowhere and fired a shot that hit Dwight. The bullet struck him, but he remained conscious and alive. The 2 sisters screamed at William to finish Dwight off, but William couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger again. That's when the final truth emerged. William was actually Dwight's half-brother. Dwight's father had carried on an affair with their mother, and William was the child born from that relationship. Dwight grabbed his weapon from the floor. He had a clear shot at William and could have easily killed him, but instead, he chose to let him live. One of the sisters then reached under the sofa and pulled out a machine gun, firing wildly in every direction. When the chaos finally ended and the smoke cleared, 3 bodies lay motionless on the floor. Carl and both of his sisters were dead. Only William had survived the massacre. Some time later, someone delivered a newspaper to Sam's house in Pittsburgh. The headline reported that everyone involved was now dead. which meant nobody would be coming after Sam or her children ever again. Dwight had not only achieved the revenge he had waited 20 years for, but he had also ensured his sister's safety for the rest of her life.